1 minute until showtime. Your show will go live in 5 seconds. 4, 3, 2, 1.
Live from Daytona Beach, Florida, bringing a voice to America, speaking the truth, and making America great again, 1 hour at a time. It's Trump Talk Now. Trump Talk Now from the Double Barrel Bar and Grill at Volusia Top Gun. Here's your host, Vic Baker.
Greetings, fellow American patriot Republicans, and welcome to Trump Talk Now, the home of fearless truth-telling about America's transformational President Donald J. Trump and his ongoing mission to make America great again. Our show is brought to you locally by Volusia Top Gun in Daytona Beach, Florida, where we're live streaming on Facebook in front of an audience of patriot Republicans. In a few minutes, we'll be talking with John O'Connor, Deep Throat's attorney and author of the new book, Postgate, a compelling account of how Bob Woodward betrayed his exclusive source for Watergate, and the Washington Post cast in on Mark Felt, later revealed as Deep Throat, the source for Woodward, and covered up the real reason behind the June 17, 1972 break-in of DNC headquarters at the Watergate. Seems like it happened only yesterday to me. We're joined here tonight by Trump Boat Parade organizer Sean Pruner, who will be explaining to everybody why Saturday's Trump flotilla has been canceled due to a very big Trump campaign event on the ground here in Volusia County. We are ground zero in this campaign, folks, and Donald Trump Jr. is recognizing that by coming to Volusia County this weekend. His big campaign bus will roll. His big campaign bus will roll onto the 2A Ranch in Ormond Beach Saturday afternoon. Go to the Volusia County Republican Facebook page or recvc.org website for details and register for this event. You can go if you don't register, but they like to have your information. We also need to know to show Donald Trump Jr. that Volusia and Flagler are all in for Trump victory. What do you say? So, did any of you manage to attend President Trump's MAGA comeback rally Monday night in Sanford? Yeah, it was awe-inspiring. At least 25,000 people from across Central Florida and beyond converged on the Orlando Sanford International Airport on a sunny Monday afternoon. In the line, I met a young Hispanic sous chef named Freddie, recently laid off by Disney because of this COVID stuff. Freddie told me he spends his time now volunteering at the food bank and in between attending Trump victory events. He is a solid Hispanic Republican. I met many more of them in the line as well. Along the line, I also met a peddler selling all kinds of Trump items to the crowd. He's black. He told me he was just shy of earning his PhD at George Washington University 5 years ago when Donald Trump came down that escalator and entered the race for the White House and changed his life. He told me he was making up to $85,000 max while working on congressional committees. He dropped it all to sell Trump swag at campaign events. Last year, he made $140,000 because people are buying that stuff. I saw people of all ethnic backgrounds and walks of life walking together into the airport to witness the reemergence of the most extraordinary president we've seen since Abraham Lincoln. I joined up with Rob Goriello, his wife Diane Summers, and their young son in the line. They joined me on the bleachers behind President Trump. Rob is the guy with the huge digital billboard barge we've seen at some of these Trump boat parades. As each hour passed, the crowd grew and grew and grew. The bleachers and every square inch of the airport tarmac was packed with happy, friendly Trump people, the deplorables on parade. On the way to the rally, I got a call from Mark Harper at the Daytona Beach News Journal. He wanted to know what I thought about the risk of the president spreading COVID with what he called a super spreader event. Well, he keeps walking into the trap when he calls and asks me questions. I said, if it's okay for anarchists to riot and burn down cities like Portland, then it's certainly all right for law-abiding Americans to exercise their constitutional rights to peaceable assembly. I told him, Mark, we're going to be standing in the open air under sunshine, which provides vitamin D, which kills the coronavirus, and ultraviolet light, which does the same. Some will wear masks, but if they don't, so what? I pointed out that they put bags over people's heads and burned them at the stake during the Dark Ages. We've kind of evolved beyond that. He said, well, aren't you concerned for your own safety? I said, not if I'm surrounded by Trump supporters. I said, Mark, we will all die someday. You could get hit by a bus or shot or hit by lightning. You will die. But in the meantime, don't be afraid to live. After he told me he was going to cover the event, I told him, well, don't forget your hazmat suit. So, we were treated to a soaring invocation from the one and only Volusia prayer warrior Webster Barnaby, who had the crowd praying and cheering at the same time. We heard from Congressman Mike Waltz and Matt Gaetz, Kimberly Guilfoyle, and then America's greatest governor, Ron DeSantis. What a prelude, huh? Then a short time later, the sound system boomed out the transmission from the control tower. Air Force One, you are cleared to land. God bless the USA, filled hearts with pride and anticipation as the commander-in-chief emerged strong, healthy, looking 20 years younger. He strode onto the stage like a conquering lion, tossing MAGA face masks like a seasoned athlete. We were treated to vintage Trump. He's back, folks, and he'll be back 4 more years, so get used to it. Now, as the week began, we were treated to a show on Capitol Hill as desperate Democrat senators tossed their slings and arrows at the incomparable Judge Amy Coney Barrett. They lectured, hectored, harassed, and tried to trick Judge Barrett into uttering just one admission that might leverage her out of contention. They are so out of her league. She came with her husband and her many children who sat through the abuse hour after hour for 2 days of questioning. At one point, Senator John Cornyn of Texas asked the judge to hold up her notes. She displayed a blank tablet with nothing on it except the Senate letterhead. The Democrat senators came loaded with victim posters, documents, false history lessons, all loaded for bear with piles of notes. Judge Barrett came with nothing beyond her personal charm, judicial temperament, and resplendent intellect. They couldn't lay a glove on her. They cannot stop Judge Barrett from becoming Justice Barrett. They cannot stop Donald J. Trump from becoming a 2-term president of the United States and a president of considerable consequence. Judge Barrett's nomination will be voted out of committee on October 22nd, and within a week, she'll be the next Justice of the United States Supreme Court. Now let's discuss the headline the mainstream media liar for hire media doesn't want you to see. The New York Post has published emails proving that Hunter Biden pursued lucrative deals involving China's largest private energy company, including one that he said would be interesting to me and my family, that is Hunter's family. He was, in fact, a bagman for his dad, using his dad's influence as vice president to collect millions of dollars, and his father got a 50% cut out of everything that Hunter picked up. Additional emails between Hunter and a Burisma official suggest a quid pro quo influence peddling scheme involving Hunter's dad, Joe Biden. The Biden campaign went dark yesterday, earlier than usual, but conceded it could not rule out a possible meeting between Joe Biden and a Burisma figure. Another of the emails sent to Biden in 2017 talked about remuneration for 6 people in a business venture. You can guess who the 6 people probably are, right? His pay was put at $850,000. I assume that's $850,000. The email also noted Hunter has some office expectations he will elaborate. The email is part of a treasure trove of data that was on a laptop Hunter Biden dropped off at a Delaware computer repair shop in 2019 and never bothered to retrieve. The shop owner found the emails and the FBI seized the laptop because he turned it over. But then nothing happened. That was late last year that they seized it, until the shop owner turned over a copy of the contents to Rudy Giuliani, who shared the material with the New York Post. Now, get this. The major networks have ignored this. Facebook is slowing down traffic on items that talk about Joe Biden and his Burisma corruption scandal. Twitter has blocked all mention of the scandal, even shutting down the White House press secretary Kayleigh McEnany's account and the entire Trump campaign account. This is outrageous. The Senate Judiciary Committee is going to haul Twitter CEO Jack Dorsey and Facebook CEO Mark Zuckerberg in for questioning on censorship and meddling in this election campaign, and there's going to be a hot seat for them, and there are going to be consequences, folks, especially after Trump wins by a landslide. This is sinister stuff, folks. We have a man who presumes to be a president, but caught with his feeble fingers in the cookie jar, and the media are trying to hide the crime. This is corruption at its worst. It stinks. The president says the Bidens are grifters and criminals, and that Twitter and Facebook have their thumb on the scales with regard to this election. I couldn't agree more. We know how they swept Hillary's emails, Benghazi, the IRS targeting, Fast and Furious, the Iran nuke dirty deal, Spygate, and Russian collusion delusion under the rug, just to mention a few. As we learned from Watergate, the cover-up is often worse than the crime. This Biden cover-up by tech tyrants is a spreading wildfire, and they will not stop until we stop them. So as of tonight, we are 19 days away from the most consequential election of our lifetimes. We will choose between a faltering, feeble, fumbling shell of a corrupt plagiarist and thieving hypocrite who dances on strings pulled by the likes of AOC, Fancy Nancy, Chuck Schemer, China, and the rabid socialist left flank, and a forceful, dynamic doer, a man who gave up much of his fortune to serve average American working men and women, a man who puts America first, a man who never shies from a fight for our values, for our lives, and for our personal freedom. A man who made promises and kept them. A man who owes nothing to the deep state, the Washington, New York, Hollywood, and globalist elites. A man who is entirely beyond the reach of corrupt lobbyists. A man who finds the common sense solutions and will waste no time in getting the job done. The man who made America great again and who will do it yet again. A man that works for us without a salary and no one else. President Donald J. Trump. Now on to my fellow Trump pundit, Volusia County's 2016 Trump-Pence campaign chairman, Joe Fieldless. Joe, you have the floor.
Good evening, Vic. Hello, friends. I have good news tonight. Right now, statistically speaking, there are 0 undecided voters. So there's virtually nothing that can change the outcome of the 2020 election. The president is going to be reelected. Of course, this comes with a caveat because the Democrats might do anything, no matter how destructive, to stop this outcome. But assuming that Pelosi won't use a flaming arrow from her quiver and burn down the White House as the president works inside, I am certain that the 2020 election cake has already been baked and Donald Trump wins 4 more years. Furthermore, because his political coattails will be long and strong, Republicans will become the majority in both houses of Congress, together with a Supreme Court majority that believes our Constitution means what it says. So much good can be done for the betterment of our republic once the Democrat Party is swept from power in Washington, D.C. That's the good news. The bad news is that the losers are going to throw a violent temper tantrum. The following report is from Breitbart. An organization of radical left-wing activists has posted an online guide for disruption. It outlines a plan to shut down the country and force President Donald Trump from power. The guide, titled Stopping the Coup, incredibly, it's available online as a Google document, is being circulated by a group called Shut Down DC. It casts its plan for disruption as a response to an imagined coup by the president in case of a close election. The guide is a manual for disruption. Parts of the guide read like a manual for staging a coup rather than a guide to prevent one. Quote, "We need to be clear that our actions must directly affect the structures and pillars of power. Our largest asset in this regard is noncompliance through massive, broad-based direct action. Where we can, we need to be in the streets, on the highways, or at the sites of power and power holders. We must refuse the legitimacy of their power through strikes, slowdowns, boycotts, and public refusal to accept an illegitimate ruling party." Another section of the guide urges activists to stop American life from continuing if the election does not go their way. Quote, in order to really win, we will need to force some pillars of power, business, military, media, or other major institutions, to side with us, or at least get out of the way. If everyday life goes on, the despot will not leave power, so there will be no incentive for real system change. You want to think about what it might take to stop business as usual. The guide indicates that activists will demand that no winner be announced until every vote is counted, and they will launch mass coordinated action to that end. The signal for violent action to begin will be if President Donald Trump is declared the winner on election night. So here we are. Winning this election will be glorious as it allows the America First agenda to continue putting American workers first. But as we close this particular chapter of our history, it must be understood, it's not the end of the story. Far from it. Remember how state media has betrayed us. So we are the media now. We are all citizen journalists, and we are all citizen soldiers. Protecting our country will be a long twilight struggle against powerful forces who want to control us by destroying our Constitution. Ronald Reagan first explained this truth in March of 1961. He said, freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction. We didn't pass it on to our children in the bloodstream. The only way they can inherit the freedom we have known is if we fight for it, protect it, defend it, and then hand it to them with the well-fought lessons of how they, in their lifetime, must do the same. And if you and I don't do this, then you and I may well spend our sunset years telling our children and our children's children what it was once like in America when men were free. Vic, let's roll.
We're anxious to share with you the story of Deep Throat's attorney, who has some very interesting insights on the skullduggery that the Washington Post purveyed in their coverage of Watergate, and their betrayal of their chief source, Mark Felt, coming up next on Trump Talk Now.
Time to drain the swamp. Let's take a time out on Trump Talk Now. At Embroidery Plus, it's all about the plus. Embroidery Plus can customize your athletic wear, golf apparel, caps, hats. Plus, Embroidery Plus is badges,
buttons, magnets, backpacks, bags, and totes, clocks, watches, plus.
2033 South Ridgewood in South Daytona. They're waiting for your call at 386-255-5880. Embroidery Plus. Let's return now to the Trump Truth. From Volusia Top Gun, it's Trump Talk Now with your host, Vic Baker.
Welcome back, Trumpublicans. Deep Throat's lawyer discovered that the Washington Post had betrayed his client while covering up the real truth about the Watergate scandal. His new book is Postgate. It's right here. The conventional wisdom of Watergate is turned on its head by the author, John D. O'Connor, who has been a former federal prosecutor and is attorney of some great repute in Washington. He uncovered it. The Nixon administration itself, involved in the cover-up, was a victim of journalistic smokescreen and prevented the mitigation of its crime, or its own criminal guilt. In fact, it points to a different culprit than the Nixon White House for the Watergate break-in, and also points to some deep betrayal of a man who honorably acted to bring out the truth and was betrayed for the 30 pieces of silver that Bob Woodward earned on writing his own book. We're privileged to have with us from his home in San Francisco, John D. O'Connor. Thank you, John, and welcome to our show.
It's great to be with you.
Well, John, let me just go through. You were a prosecutor. Well, thanks. We love this show, and we love talking to folks like you. Now, I was a kid in college, a journalist back then too, but I was running a radio station and newspaper, and we followed that Watergate hearing religiously. We followed all. We followed a certain narrative. We thought it was a certain story. You've uncovered something that's entirely different, And you were a prosecutor, a young prosecutor in that time period, and you began to put the pieces together and figure out yourself who Mark Felt was. So tell us first how you got to know who Mark Felt was and get to know his family and become a trusted ally, confident attorney for them.
Yeah, well, back in the early 70s, 1974 to 70s, to 1980, I was a prosecutor. And I was obsessed with this character, Deep Throat. I followed, like you, I followed Watergate very deeply, thought I knew all about it, and was quite happy and satisfied with the Post reporting. I thought it was great, and I thought it was a union of honest federal employees and honest reporters. Alas, in recent years, my faith in the Post has been shattered. And all the partisan advocacy journalism we have today is not an exception to Watergate. Watergate was its cause. Now, back then, I read the book, All the President's Men, and I could go through, and it took me a little while, but I could prove positively that Deep Throat was Mark Felt. So my first response to that was, well, if it's so obvious to someone like me that you could figure out who this is, Woodward must have paid him because he's actually outing his source, isn't he? Well, guess what? They didn't pay him. They just outed him because they were going to make a lot of money from it. And not too much longer, and they didn't publish the whole story, by the way, that Felt told them. And it was only 6 years later when the Post decided that it was wrong to do what we now today call FISA searches. And they railed to get Felt indicted. The guy that they knew was Deep Throat, that had probably given them $1 billion in increased value because of the prestige that he brought to them and this increased circulation. They urged his indictment because, after all, Felt was a conservative and he was going after the Weather Underground and the PLO. And shouldn't we indict people like that who go do searches like that aren't compliant with the Fourth Amendment? Well, to bring you to fast forward, I'm sitting at this very table I'm sitting at now, and across the table was a young man I'd known for several years. And I started telling stories about how my father was a spy with the FBI during World War II and how he bumbled a little bit. And the fellow said, well, you know, my grandfather was with the FBI. He was a pretty high-level guy. Maybe your father knew my grandfather. I said, well, Nick, what's his name? He said, it's Mark Felt. Well, after falling off my chair, I got back up and I told him his grandfather was Deep Throat and could I come up and meet him? Mark had always denied it to the family, and we got rolling from there. But in my book, I go through all the betrayals of the Post and Watergate. And then as my head is being shoved into the dumpster constantly by my interaction with the Post and with Woodward, finally I say, there's something fishy here. I've got to really look, were they really honest in their reporting? And I go through it, and it itself is an intriguing book. I'm not going to blow all the fun of reading it because it reads like a murder mystery, the first half of the book. And finally, I figure out I've got to do something. I copy all 3,000 Post articles during Watergate, which is very hard. It takes Herculean effort to do it. But finally, I did that, and I compared all the available information that the Post had, and I proved fairly conclusively, beyond a reasonable doubt, I would bring this case to a jury, and I could prove it 7 times over that the Post committed fraud in Watergate. They falsely portrayed the Watergate burglary as part of a campaign operation. On its face, you think it is, but it isn't. It was a CIA operation. It was really directed toward naughty talk between men and women, and there was a couple lieutenants who thought that was a good idea, but the head people in the White House didn't know anything about it. And had the Post told the truth, Richard Nixon probably would go down as one of our greatest presidents. He would have a little shame on him because his underlings did this, and we would actually have understood the CIA's abusive tactics probably 50 years earlier than we discovered them. But they hid everything. They wanted to protect the DNC. They were joined at the hip with the DNC, of course, and they wanted to get Nixon. So why not commit fraud? And that fraud in Watergate proved out to be very profitable and spawned a whole generation of new journalists who went to journalism school to change the world. And something a very left-leaning journalist named Matt Taibbi said the other day that I think was very good, and Matt's an honest guy, very left, said, you know, after Watergate, it used to be reporters were regular middle-class kids who were out there and they kind of distrusted the elites. Now the people that are getting into investigative journalism are elites themselves, they're Ivy League types, and they like the idea of going behind the rope and mingling with the powerful and becoming part of the powerful. So right now, Vic, and I'll stop, I'm yammering on a bit, but right now what I think we have is we have journalists who believe that they wear a jersey and they've got to do everything they can to shut out any competing article. I mean, my gosh, if Joe Biden is shown to be corrupt, we can't tell anybody that. That might hurt the election. So we have a media that is on a team. They've got a jersey. They are incentivized by Woodward and Bernstein to get scalps of the other side and protect their own side. And that's what's going on. It's a shame, but we live with it every day. And it's very, very harmful to our democracy. And thank God we've got active talk radio, we've got the internet, and we've got some very good sites of people that really understand what America is about. And that's why I'm happy to be, this brings me to this very broadcast. So thank you very much.
Well, John, it's fascinating to me because I was in the media at a time when we were using, reel-to-reel tape recorders, and I was actually shooting 16 millimeter film, and we didn't have the capacities we have now. There was no internet, there were no round-the-clock cable channels. Walter Cronkite was it, pretty much, and of course that was what popularized the whole Watergate notion, the myth that got out there. But the Washington Post, we all looked at that and we said, wow, that's real journalism. And as much as I was conservative even as a young man, I admired the intrepid investigative reporting, but I didn't realize that there was more to this story, and your book reveals something very, very intriguing. And the CIA was looking for something that I would never suspect the CIA to want to have an interest in, and that was that the DNC was actually running a call girl operation. And they wanted to know about that. But what would be the motivation for exposing that or even finding out about that, John? And if the Nixon administration wasn't, or the White House was not really fully aware of that, why were there people tied to the committee to the president somehow tied in with these CIA folks? Try to untangle that knot for me.
Well,
that's the part I had a little trouble
last question,
understanding.
Sure. Last question first. Of course, the Democratic senators getting rid of a Republican president, that's easy to figure out. And also, they didn't have any information. Their information came from Woodward. They hired Scott Armstrong as the chief investigator for the Senate committee because Scott Armstrong was Woodward's second in command, and he could be a funnel from Woodward. So everything is circular. The press feeds the Senate, and that's all they learn. But let me tell you, the CIA, any action in the United States done by the CIA is illegal. Any operation, no matter how benign.
Yeah, that's right.
I lived in San Francisco. I live outside of San Francisco now, but I lived on Chestnut Street in San Francisco. And in the 1950s, on Chestnut Street, there was a lavishly appointed apartment with the two-way mirror, and the CIA, Colonel Harry White of the CIA, was looking at call girls and their johns, usually drugged, behind a two-way mirror. This thing has been going on for years with the CIA. And here's the deal. The CIA was protecting the prostitute operation down the street from the DNC. And they were watching them through mirrors and taping them. And it was some of it was extortion, some of it was their mind control experiments. There'd been research out of Duke thinking that if you knew about someone's sexual preferences and so forth, you could help build a psychological machine that then would control the subject of interest. But whether it's extortion or legitimate human control research, it was illegal if done in the United States, except the president has ultimate national security authority. The CIA's charter makes domestic operations illegal. But under the Constitution, the president has the authority to conduct any national security operation he sees fit to conduct. If there's a whiskey rebellion and the ink is barely dry on the Bill of Rights, George Washington can get on his horse with his soldiers and go up and open up a can of whoop-ass on the rebels. He doesn't need a warrant. He doesn't need anything else. He can go into the barn and collect guys, as he did, bring back 30 guys for trial. The rest of the guys melt away. This is what the president has always done. Abraham Lincoln freed the slaves, otherwise forbidden by the Constitution, on the grounds of national security. There was a Civil War, national security. He did not free the slaves in the 4 states that were not fighting the government, fighting the North, and they were not freed. So everything, if you can get the president to say, Vic, go shoot Joe Blow for national security purposes, Vic, you can go shoot him, and it's okay. And that's the basis for interning the Japanese during World War II. Although that might have been unwise, it was within the president's power. The Supreme Court held. So what the CIA was
Lincoln
doing
himself
is
suspended habeas corpus. Yeah,
right.
I'm just saying
So
Lincoln
Lincoln
himself suspended habeas corpus during the Civil War. Yeah.
Correct. That was the whole idea. He even arrested, I think, a senatorial candidate, ex-party McMillan or whatever it was. But anyway, the CIA had infiltrated the White House. Howard Hunt was an active CIA man. James McCord had infiltrated the CRP. He was an active CIA man, both falsely retired. And the reason people could never figure out why McCord would be on the team if they didn't want any identification of the CRP or the White House. Yet here's the CRP security guy on the team. Why is that? Well, for various reasons that I go into the book, he had to be on the team to control things. There's various, I get into it about what they're trying to do. But remember this, if they didn't even want the second burglary, there was one burglary, then this was the second one that probably John Dean wanted. But all they needed was one burglary and one wiretapping of the prostitutes using Republican funds to basically say, our tapping of prostitutes is now legal. Gosh, we got the presidents, we got the attorney general's okay. We got the White House counsel, John Dean, attorney general, John Mitchell, we got their okay. Now, Mitchell never okayed it, but you could make it look like you did because it was presented to him and he sort of poo-pooed it. But my point is, now you have authority from the president's delegates, and it is now presumptively legal. And now, if 10 years from that point, somebody in Congress realized that these guys had been tapping prostitutes for the last 20 years, they could say, well, hey, the president approved it. This is authorized. Look at this. We've got the receipts. We've got the bugs. It was paid for by the president's slush fund and the CRP monies. So when James McCord was arrested after the burglaries, he told the Washington Post, gee whiz, I thought this was legal. He hadn't talked to his peeps yet when he was arrested. Then later on, he said, well, I thought it was legal because the president and the attorney general had authorized this. So then the question is, well, John, what was the national security purpose?
Right. I have to interrupt you for a moment. If you can stay with us for just another brief segment, I'd like to explore another aspect, and that is Woodward's betrayal of Mark Felt, of you, and of the truth in the presenting of this case. And also, I'm going to explore a question about why would Nixon make such an effort to cover something up when he could have pointed to the CIA and exculpated himself. So we're going to return in a moment, John, if you just stay with us. And I'll remind our viewers that this segment was brought to you locally by the Double Barrel Bar and Grill, and Trump Talk Now will return in just a brief moment.
Time to check on the progress of the wall. Let's take a time out on Trump Talk Now. It's racing's original North Turn. If you're looking for a good drink, great entertainment, and the best in food, they're right on the beach at racing's original North Turn. Rhonda and Walt invite you to come on down to dinner tonight. Here are a couple of testimonials. These are actual testimonials from people who have enjoyed the North Turn. Been there many times, always great food and drinks, great location on the beach. And another, what a great experience. It's my new favorite restaurant in the Daytona Beach area. Racing's Original North Turn on South Atlantic Avenue. That's A1A in Ponce Inlet, about 3.2 miles south of the Dunlawton Bridge and A1A intersection. It's Racing's Original North Turn, a restaurant, museum, bar, gift shop, live music. That's Racing's North Turn. Racing's North Turn has been voted by you top 10 beach bar 7 years in a row. Next year, they're going for top 5. Let's return now to the Trump Truth. From Volusia Top Gun, it's Trump Talk Now with your host, Vic Baker.
Welcome back, Trump Republicans. This segment brought to you locally by Sheds of Daytona. John, the lecture we have with this show is that we can spend more time with an interview subject and give you more time to actually talk about your book instead of squeezing you into a 2-minute segment where you don't have much time. We want to show the book to folks here, and it's Postgate, and it's how the Washington Post betrayed, deep throat, covered up Watergate, and began today's partisan advocacy journalism. John, this thing, you try to play ball with Bob Woodward and get Mark felt the honorable credit he deserved for being an honest whistleblower. In effect, he was a man who had every good intent for the FBI. He was a real old school FBI guy. He was a J. Edgar Hoover guy. Now, of course, there were some things that J. Edgar Hoover did that may not pass muster either. But Mark Felt was a straight shooter, as far as you can tell. As far as you describe him, he's a straight shooter. He was advancing into some dementia, early dementia, when you first met him, and of course that became a race to time to get a book out. But then Bob Woodward kind of gave you the bum's rush, didn't he?
Oh yeah, he did everything he could to prevent us from writing a book. And as a matter of fact, I could not stop him from talking to Mark's adult children, and he tried to persuade them, as I go through in the book, that their dad was not deep throat. And so I thought that was interesting. I had to keep telling him, no, I know dad's got dementia. He can't remember whether he went into a garage or a bus station. He knew he was deep throat, but believe me, I proved this back in 1976. I'm quite sure of it. Please bear with me. Woodward is lying to you. And so that's the thing we went through. And of course, it hurt me in trying to get a book published, because people would ask me, well, what does Woodward say? And I'd have to tell them truthfully, well, he's trying to say that Mark isn't deep throat, with all the hints and winks and nods that he's not. So I found that very distasteful.
He did write a book of his.
Finally got something.
He did write a book of his own, and he sourced it off a book that Mark Felt himself had written before. And because at that point, Mark Felt was beyond that reach, and he wrote this book trying to take a little bit more lucre out of the effort that he had and take credit for it once that was passed. Am I right?
Correct. Absolutely. That's exactly what happened.
Yeah. And so he cashed in on Mark Felt's legacy as an honest whistleblower, but he also transmogrified the whole idea, the whole story of Watergate into something other than what it really was. He didn't really tell the real story. In fact, they tried to suppress you in trying to put out the real story, didn't they?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. When I innocently was trying to put in things into my book, into my first book, before Postgate, I was yelled at. I was literally yelled at. And I did not know, because the Post also defrauded me in the sense that they did not tell me that my book publisher was controlled by the Post. They had represented to me that I had a completely independent publisher. And lo and behold, later on, I find out that Ben Bradley is writing the checks for everybody. So no wonder they didn't want me to write what I wanted to write. So it was a very bizarre situation all the way around. And what they were trying to do with me was catch and kill. And they thought, well, this busy lawyer is just going to write whatever pap we tell him about Mark Felt's book, and he's going to go back to his practice. Well, I pledged to my client that I would do the best job I could in writing about Mark. So I took it seriously, and I found all this stuff that I had to write. And the Post kept fighting me and doing all kinds of things. And it really gets into great detail in the book. It's kind of fun. It's an intriguing thing for me. I'm a Midwestern schoolboy, and I trust people. Even though I'm a lawyer, I try to trust people and act straightforwardly with those who I think are straightforward with me. And they were defrauding me. And it's very juicy in the book, intriguing, and that's why it makes it a fun book, as well as I think an important one.
Well, what I'm going to do now is ask you this question. Putting yourself in Nixon's shoes, when this all transpired, why do you think he was so aggressive in trying to shut down the investigation instead of just allowing it to be diverted over to the CIA in terms of the initiation of this? If, in fact, if it had become reported this was a CIA operation, Nixon would have been pretty much legally off the hook, and the American people would have moved on, would they not? Call girl operation at the DNC, the CIA is looking into this. Oh, White House has an incidental role, but so what? These guys will go to jail, whatever. But the White House says, let the truth come out. Or, of course, as Joe Fielded says, if he had burned the tapes, of course, it'd be a different story too. But
Right.
why not? Why did he go that route? Is it because Nixon had that Macbeth mentality that everybody was out to get him and that he just couldn't escape and he had to do it?
Well, bingo, you said something that's very good there, Vic, which is if the president would have known of the strong possibility that this was a CIA operation, all bets would have been off and he probably would have gone that route. 2 days after the burglary, Mark Felt told his boss this was a White House job, a CIA job, or both. The answer was both. However, the person who was advising Nixon and was his consigliere was the great John Dean. Nixon thought that this must have been done by John Mitchell or Chuck Colson. And both of them denied it, but Nixon thought, well, they're lying. Meanwhile, young Johnny Dean comes in to advise the president. He knows exactly what happened, but he's not going to give him honest advice. So what he does is, because of Felt's statement about the CIA, he's the guy who came up with the idea that Nixon should try to stop the FBI investigation by saying that it's going to interfere with the CIA operation. And that happened in June 23rd, and that was really the smoking gun that got Nixon to resign. If Nixon would have known that this really was a CIA operation, or if Dean would have honestly said, by the way, Mark Felt thinks that this might be a CIA operation, that would have been a big deal. But that was never told to Nixon. And then Nixon all along doesn't realize that who he's really protecting is John Dean. Colson is saying, I didn't do it. Mitchell's saying he didn't do it. Nixon is tasking John Dean with getting a report to say that nobody in Nixon's White House was involved. Well, guess why Dean never wrote it? He was involved. So what we have is the situation of the people who didn't know about it were advising Nixon.
Well, we could go on forever talking about this, and of course, even the destruction of evidence by John Dean that pointed everybody, the bloodhounds, in the wrong direction on this, and you had it was
right. He destroyed
on this. Yeah, he destroyed evidence. But this book is fascinating for anybody who's who I wouldn't say an aficionado, but somebody who studied Watergate. This book is an absolute adventure story, and I highly recommend it to everybody in our audience and anybody. Postgate by John D. O'Connor, attorney at law, working out of San Francisco, and that's a whole other subject we can go on about another day, where you live in San Francisco and Nancy Pelosi's area. But John, you've been marvelous. Thank you for being so gracious and generous with your time, and we wish you well with your book and your ongoing pursuits. Thanks for being on Trump.
Vic, thanks. I'll say hi to Nancy and Diane and Gavin and all the Democrats around here, okay?
Yeah, you can say hi to them, but don't repeat what our people are saying about them here, though. Thank you, John. Thanks for being with us on Trump Talk Now.
Okay, take care. See you.
Talk to you later. Bye-bye. And we'll be back in a moment.
Scanning the networks for fake news. Let's take a time out on Trump Talk Now. ShedsofDaytona.com has it all. All shapes, all sizes. Wood buildings by Weather King. Cabins, garages, she sheds, man caves. Metal buildings by Carolina. Carports, RV covers, barns, and Overholt greenhouses. Gazebos, screen rooms, dog kennels, chicken coops. They have it all. Come see ShedsofDaytona.com. Located at the Daytona Flea and Farmers Market, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. Want more Trump Talk Now? You can go to Blog Talk Radio, search Trump Talk Now, and select your favorite audio past edition. That's Blog Talk Radio, search Trump Talk Now, and select. Now you have more choices. You can go to our Facebook page, Trump Talk Now, scroll down to select your favorite show from our archives, or go to Blog Talk Radio for an audio version. And remember, Patriots, please like us and share us. Help us spread the word. You can watch our broadcast live from anywhere in the world on our Facebook page, Trump Talk Now. Let's return now to the Trump Truth. From Volusia Top Gun, it's Trump Talk Now with your host, Vic Baker.
Welcome back, Trumpublicans. This segment brought to you locally by Racing's Norris Turn. What a fascinating story that nobody has ever heard told before. Huh,
Unbelievable. Joe? You know, I was a Watergate aficionado myself. I was a young man. I was rooting for the Washington Post. I thought those were the heroes. Nixon was the bad guy. And, of course, the whole television show of the hearings, which was fabulous. You know, the government printing office put out their 10 paperback books. Every word that was spoken in the Watergate hearings is in those books. I bought them. I still have them.
Howard Baker, Tennessee Senator, Republican.
He was the famous what did the president know and when did he know it? That was Howard Baker. Sam Ervin he was an old
North Carolina senator.
And he had his big white eyebrows bobbing up and down. I mean, it was wonderful theater. It was wonderful theater, and I was hooked.
But that's what it really was, theater, folks.
Yeah.
It was make-believe, just as we're facing now with the Washington establishment trying to do in Trump. And now, speaking of Trump, we have with us, welcome to the show, Sean Pruner, the man who has organized the boat parades for Donald Trump here locally. Welcome, Sean Pruner, to the show.
Thank you.
Now, Sean and I have had conversation. I was on Rob Goriello's barge with a big digital billboard at your last boat parade. I did a video. Everybody saw that on Facebook, and that was a lot of fun, and it was a great event, and you've done more than one of these. Right. You had one set for tomorrow, but something happened. We found out on short notice that because Volusia County has done so well in supporting the President Trump's campaign, and we had a lot of our people running that rally in Sanford, folks. A lot of the Volusia County people were down there running the show, and they know that. They wanted to give some reward to Volusia County and Flagler County for all the efforts that are going on here. So Donald Trump Jr. is coming to the 2A Ranch in Ormond Beach Saturday afternoon. We want people flag waving and sign waving as soon as noon along all the roads up to the ranch, and you're welcome to come. You can register online, but if you don't, you can still come. That's okay. And then I had a conversation this afternoon with Sean, and I said, Sean, the Trump campaign is kind of freaking out. They want the biggest possible crowd for this event. If everybody's at the boat parade and they're all tired out from a boat parade, we're afraid we're not going to have the crowd that we need. And Sean gave me this response.
Well, it's funny because, being asked to cancel it, I'm like, I can't do that. I got 1 million people coming to it, people from all over the state. So as we started talking, Don Jr. coming to Volusia County is a big deal. I mean, that really is. Yeah. That is a big deal. So, sometimes you got to do things you don't want to for the greater good, and I get it. So as we talked, it was like, all right, let's do it, and then let's shift the focus and let's use that foundation or format that I have and create awareness for that event. Because it was, 3 days ago tops that, Ringhaver got that call, and all of a sudden she posted and is like, what? So it's a very short notice to put a big event together. And,
That's right.
If people don't know how much work it takes to put those on, this is probably going to turn out to be an incredible event done in a couple of days. Right?
That's correct. And just as the rally in Sanford, we only had a few days to plan for that after the president was declared, cured of COVID.
Absolutely.
And so within a matter of a few days, we get a rally in Sanford that we were originally going to have on October 1st, I believe. Right. On the 12th. 12 days later, it's just redone. And when you see the operation, they come in with a big semi that has this huge screen the size of a drive-in movie screen, comes up on a hydraulic lift that they can all see on the other side. Then other huge cranes holding up flags and bleachers and buses for security on the perimeter. Now, the Donald Trump Jr. plan visit won't be quite the same, but it's going to be a pretty big deal, folks.
Right.
And the 2A Ranch is a fabulous place, plenty of parking. And so we want people there by noon to wave, to just line just like we did for Women for Trump, for Lara Trump and her group, the Women for Trump bus. We had hundreds show up for that. We want thousands to show up for Don Jr. And I think we can do it because Volusia County is ground zero in the battle for America.
There was about 500 for Laura Trump down at Port Orange, but that's a very kind of small area. This is the 2A Ranch. You can Google this, and they'll give you a Google map in there, and you see this is all spread out. There'll be plenty of parking. It's going to be easy to get to. It's off 40, about 7-8 miles west of the interstate. Come on out and see it.
And if you wonder about whether you'll be safe out there, it's called the 2A Ranch for a reason. The 2A is the Second Amendment.
It's like having the show here. We're not very worried about it, are we?
As safe as you are at Volusia Top Gun. Okay. And so we tell folks, show up early. Little trick, you want to get some water, don't bother with a cooler. Just get a little plastic bag. Freeze some bottles of water in the freezer overnight. Carry some non-perishable snack foods for you to bring yourself in. They may have some other refreshment. And then if you need a chair, bring a chair. This might be a little less stringent than some of the Trump rallies, you know. So the point is, you'll be standing and walking, but you're going to be with fellow Trump Republicans. Right. You're going to have a ball. And here's the thing. As I said to Sean, you know, the boat parades are great, but there's no reason, nothing special about any specific date. We have a guy coming in who's a superstar in the political field, could be a future president himself, and we don't get that very often. So this is also an opportunity for people to realize a boat parade is kind of a party. People are having a party. Trump campaign is work. There are people making phone calls, there are people knocking doors, and when events like this happen, they are persuasion events. People come from all over. We've been calling all the adjacent counties saying you have to be here. Show Don Jr., and by virtue of him seeing it, show the president what we think of our president.
I agree.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yep. And Joe Fieldis, a note: the optics and the Trump landslide. This is on Great Gateway Pundit today. Data from the Trump rally in Des Moines spells doom for Joe Biden and the Democrat Socialists. Get this: he held his third rally in 3 days in Des Moines last night. He had another one today in North Carolina, I believe. They released this: 10,139 voters identified. 48.5% of them were not Republicans. Think about that. 29.4% of the people at that rally were Democrats. 25% of them did not vote in 2016. 13.7% did not vote in the last 4 elections, but they're going to vote for Trump this time.
I've mentioned this many times. There's 62 million registered voters who did not vote in 2016. I think a good chunk of those are going to get off their couch and vote this time, and I don't think they're getting off their couch for Biden.
We'll talk about Joe Biden, Burisma, and Twitter in a moment. We'll come back in just a moment on Trump Talk Now.
Living the American dream. Let's take a time out on Trump Talk Now. There's more Trump Talk Now, Patriots. You can catch us live on our Facebook page, Trump Talk Now. You can watch a previous show on our same Facebook page, Trump Talk Now. You can also stream our audio version on Blog Talk Radio. Search for Trump Talk Now. And coming soon will be our past shows streaming on our YouTube channel, Trump Talk Now. We wish to thank our host, Volusia Top Gun, and the Double Barrel Restaurant. If you need anything related to guns, Volusia Top Gun is a must-stop. From retail to lessons and instruction to gun range, it's all here. Let's return now to the Trump Truth. From Volusia Top Gun, it's Trump Talk Now with your host, Vic Baker.
Welcome back, Trump Republicans. This segment brought to you by Embroidery Plus, and we locally, and we thank you for being with us. I'm still knocked over by John O'Connor. That was great stuff. But we're talking now about a similar media abuse. We have Twitter shutting down the president's campaign account. Twitter shutting down the press secretary of the White House's account because they are purveying a story published in a reputable newspaper which has the 4th biggest circulation in the United States, the New York Post. That's a reputable newspaper. The fact that Rudy Giuliani gave him evidence that the FBI had been sitting on since December of last year doesn't make it any less valid. Biden's own campaign has conceded that it's conceivable that, yes, he did meet.
Which they had to change because their original story was, we never met with these people. Absolutely not. And then they said, well, maybe we met, but we didn't. It was innocuous.
Now, the CEO, Jack Dorsey of Twitter, admitted in a statement that we may have made a mistake by shutting down accounts and trying to squelch this story. Mistake. What they did is they lit a bonfire because now the story is going so contagious that it's worse. It's like Watergate, fueled by a megaton bomb. Ted Cruz has announced the Judiciary Committee will subpoena Twitter CEO Jack Dorsey to testify after the second day of Twitter blocking the New York Post Hunter Biden reports. Now, this is the thing. Hunter Biden was acting as a bag man for his daddy. There's one communication that's been pulled out. He's to his sister.
Talking to his
saying
sister.
that, oh, Jay, you made out better because Daddy usually makes me give him 50% of everything I collect.
Yeah. He says for 30 years I've been doing this and being a bag man, I guess. And then he says, but Pop, Joe Biden, always takes half. He says, I'm not going to do that to you. He's going to cut you a better deal. This is, if you read this, it sounds like dialogue out of The Godfather.
This is beyond belief, folks. And the Washington establishment is just tearing up. Now, in the midst of all this, we've got a new Justice, Amy Coney Barrett, who is serenely smarter than everybody else in that room. And as she just looks at them, you can see the expression on her face. You are such an idiot. She's saying it. You can hear her say it. You're such an idiot. What do I have for my notes? Right here.
They used to call Obama the smartest man in the room, but of course he needed a teleprompter to talk to school children. You really are the smartest person in the world when you don't need any notes. She had no notes. She's taken on all these adversaries, and she sits there just with herself and the knowledge and comfortable in her own skin and her legal brain, and she just takes on all questions.
And Kamala Harris tries a strain of questioning. Well, do you agree that cigarettes cause cancer? Well, it says so, the label in the morning. And do you agree that this thing, and then she goes, well, do you agree that climate change is, no, I'm sorry, you're not getting me there. She said there's quite a bit of dispute over climate change, and that's something that may be subject to litigation. And of course, she had to keep reminding the senators that, just as Justice Ginsburg said, if something has potential to be litigated in the future, a Supreme Court justice or potential one cannot comment on it because it may come before the court. And the fact that she was a clerk to Scalia and agrees with a lot of his opinions, that means nothing. That doesn't mean she's not an independent thinker. Not one other thing about integrity and the loss of integrity. C-SPAN. We all trust C-SPAN to be pretty bland and ordinary and not biased, but C-SPAN anchor Steve Scully, is going to be the moderator of the second presidential debate. And that all blew up, of course, over the COVID nonsense. And then he had this tweet that he sent directly to Anthony Scaramucci, who was the 5-day Trump press secretary, who blew up. And
now a virulent, never-Trumper.
Rabid anti-Trumper. And what we have is he said, my account was hacked. Well, it turns out they did an investigation. And he lied about that because obviously it was an obvious lie.
Well, Steve has a history. They found this out immediately in 2012 and 2013. He said things that he wanted to take back, so he said my account was hacked. So this was the third time he's played this game, and you can't say the dog ate my homework that many times.
He's been suspended indefinitely. Okay, now also James O'Keefe, Project Veritas, exposed in Colorado, a hard left anarchist socialist who works for the Democrat Party of Colorado, and also had a job with the local cable provider. He lost his job there. And he is actually literally admitted, after the undercover was revealed, admitted on camera, yes, I did say I want to go out and kill conservatives. Yes, I do want to create havoc. Yes, I do want to guillotine the enemy. And I want to wreak havoc in this country if Trump gets elected. And if Biden gets elected and doesn't sign the things we want signed, we'll do the same thing to him. This guy openly admits that that's what their plan is. So get ready, folks. Gird your loins, because even if Trump wins by a landslide, even an epic landslide, they're coming for us.
Well, the shutdown D.C. group, which I was speaking about, they've got a plan and they're going to execute it. And the signal is when they declare Trump the winner that night, the violence starts.
Here's another item. I'm ashamed to say I was a Democrat. First-time voters and former Dems rallied to re-elect Trump in Pennsylvania. They're showing up. And we told you about the data. Rudy Giuliani also, and Ted Cruz. And then, he had this mega rally today, the president in Greenville, North Carolina. Now, the other thing is, tonight, folks, get out your popcorn. And ABC is screaming because NBC has got a town hall. This was going to be the night of the second debate. Instead, we got dueling town halls. President Trump on NBC, Sleepy Joe on ABC. Who do you think is going to watch Sleepy Joe? ABC is not going to have any viewers. Everybody's going to watch Trump. The only thing people will be curious about is whether any questions are asked Sleepy Joe about his corruption, his years and decades of corruption.
When do we ever get accountability in anything that takes place in this country?
It's not going to be until we reelect President Trump.
So maybe in the second term, yeah.
And you know, he's not happy with Bill Barr right now. But keep in mind the intricate web of deceit that has been woven by Democrats and the deep state is so involved. It's going to take a little time. I'm talking here. It's going to take a little time to unravel. So I want to give credit to our team, Shane Stanton, our Director of Technology. Good job tonight, Shane. Stacy Brinkerhoff, our Assistant Producer. Kathy Abelgarth, our Business Development Director. Robert Maurer, Mr. Clean, our Assistant Producer. And Mike Multane, Mad Dog, our Founder and Executive Producer. In 2 weeks, Daniel Allott was here in 2016 covering us. There's a chapter in this book, On the Road in Trump's America, about Volusia County. You're going to want to hear him in 2 weeks. Next week, Michael Anton, former Assistant National Security Advisor, Deputy National Security Advisor to President Trump, will be on our show, we hope on the big screen, in a week from tonight. So we keep it coming. We've got just 19 days tonight until the election, until we re-elect the most consequential president the American people have ever seen. And next week, we'll see you back on Trump Talk Now.
Thanks for joining us as we make America great again, 1 hour at a time. Trump Talk Now originates from the Double Barrel Bar and Grill at Volusia Top Gun in Daytona Beach, Florida. Join us next week as we live the American dream on Trump Talk Now.